The coffee was still hot when my son called. I remember that detail because I had just poured it dark roast. 2 sugars. The way my wife Margaret used to make it for me every morning for 39 years. She had been gone for 11 days. I was still making 2 cups out of habit, still setting 2 places at the table, still reaching for her hand in the dark at 3 a.m., and finding only cold sheets. I picked up the phone on the second ring. Dad. My son's voice was flat. Not the voice of a grieving son. The voice of a man who had already made a decision before dialing. We need to talk about the house. I set the coffee down. Your mother isn't even 2 weeks in the ground, I said. I know. But these things take time to sort out. And the longer we wait, I hung up. I sat at that kitchen table for a long time. The coffee went cold. Outside, the oak tree Margaret had planted the year our daughter was born swayed in the November wind. 31 years that tree had been growing. It was taller than the house now. Margaret used to sit on the back porch and watch the birds in it every morning. Cardinals, mostly. She loved cardinals. I had not cried since the funeral. I don't know why. The grief was there, a stone sitting in the center of my chest, heavy and permanent. But the tears wouldn't come, maybe because I was too tired. Maybe because I had spent the last 14 months watching the woman I loved disappear by degrees. And some part of me had already been grieving long before she took her last breath. Or maybe because in the back of my mind, behind all the sorrow, something else had been quietly growing. I had just never expected to need it so soon. My name is Robert. I am 64 years old. I spent 31 years as a civil engineer, building bridges in places most people will never visit. My hands are rough. My back aches in the rain. I am not a complicated man. Margaret and I met when we were both 23, at a company picnic of all places. She worked in accounting. She had a laugh that could fill a room and a stubbornness that could empty one. We were married 11 months later. We built a life in Clarksville, Tennessee, a 4-bedroom house on a quiet street, a vegetable garden in the back, 2 kids who grew up running through the sprinklers on summer afternoons. Our son, David, is 40 now. He works in commercial real estate in Nashville. He has a beautiful house, a beautiful wife, and a beautiful life that he has spent the last decade making sure we knew was better than ours. Not cruelly, subtly. The offhand comments about our neighborhood, the way he'd glance around our kitchen when he visited, like he was calculating what it would cost to renovate. The questions about our finances that were never quite questions, more like audits. Our daughter Renee is 37. She lives in Atlanta with her husband, a man I have never warmed to, and their 3 children. Renee is not a bad person, but she has always followed David's lead, the way she did when they were small. When David said jump, Renee asked how high. Some things don't change. Margaret saw it before I did. She saw most things before I did. They love the idea of us more than they love us, she told me once, about 2 years before she got sick. We were sitting on the back porch, watching the Cardinals. They love what we represent. Stability, home, a place to come back to. But the actual work of loving us, calling just to talk, coming when nothing is on the table, that they find harder. I told her she was being too hard on them. She gave me that look, the one that meant you know I'm right and you're not ready to admit it. She was usually right. The diagnosis came on a Tuesday in September 2 years ago. Pancreatic cancer, stage 3. The oncologist was kind. He used words like aggressive and challenging and quality of life. Margaret held my hand the entire time. In the car on the way home, she was the one who comforted me. I need you to listen to me, she said. Not as my husband who is scared, as the man who built bridges for 30 years. Practically. Can you do that? I wiped my eyes. I can try. Good. Because there are things we need to do, and we need to do them while I can still think clearly. David and Renee came, of course, when we told them. David flew up from Nashville the same day. He sat across from us at this very kitchen table, with an expression I can only describe as concerned calculation. The face of a man who is grieving and planning simultaneously, and is not entirely sure which one he's doing. Mom, whatever you need, he said. And obviously, we'll need to think about the practical stuff. The house, the finances, David. Margaret's voice was quiet. I am not dead yet. He had the grace to look ashamed, Renee cried. Genuinely, I think. She held her mother's hand and cried, and Margaret stroked her hair the way she had when Renee was small. And for a moment it felt like family again, like the thing we used to be before careers and distance and the slow accumulation of priorities had changed us. That moment lasted about 3 days. Over the following months, the visits became less frequent. David came every 6 weeks or so, usually on weekends, usually with some excuse about why he couldn't stay longer. Renee called more often but visited less. The drive from Atlanta, she said. The kids' schedules, you understand. Margaret understood everything. That was the remarkable thing about her. She understood, and she did not waste energy being bitter about it. She spent her energy on other things. She called our attorney, a man named Gerald Whitmore, in October of that year. She didn't tell me everything they discussed. She told me enough. I'm making sure you're protected, she said. Whatever happens, Margaret, I know you don't like talking about it, but I need to know it's done. I need to be able to let go when it's time. And I can't do that if I'm worried about you. She touched my face. Her hands were thin by then, but her grip was still firm. Let me do this one last thing. For you, il est here. I didn't ask the details. I trusted her the way I had trusted her, for 39 years completely, and without reservation. That was the only way I knew how to love. She deteriorated faster in the spring. By May, she was on hospice. By July, she rarely left the bedroom. I slept in the chair beside her bed most nights, waking at every sound, terrified that one morning I would reach for her hand and find it still. David visited twice during those final 3 months. Once in May, once in late June. Each time, he found reasons to talk to me privately away from Margaret, away from the hospice nurse, about planning ahead. The house, the estate, what Margaret's wishes were. She's still here, I told him, both times. I know, Dad. I'm just trying to... She's still here, David. Renee came once in June and stayed 4 days. She sat with her mother, read to her, watched old movies on the small television I had moved into the bedroom. That was the Renee I remembered. I was grateful for those 4 days. Margaret died on a Thursday morning in August, just after sunrise. I was holding her hand. The cardinal was in the oak tree outside the window. I don't know if I believe in signs, but I watched that bird for a long time after. I called David first. He said he would come as soon as he could arrange things at work. The funeral was the following Monday. It rained. David arrived Sunday evening. He was polite, efficient, and distracted in the way of a man who has already mentally moved on to the next item on his agenda. He helped with the arrangements I hadn't yet finished. I was grateful for that. Whatever else I felt, Renee did not come. She called Sunday afternoon. There was a work thing, a conference she had committed to months ago, she said. It was in Seattle. She couldn't get out of it. I stood in the kitchen and held the phone and listened to my daughter explain why she could not attend her mother's funeral. I did not shout. I did not cry. I said, I understand. I said, your mother would understand. I said, travel safe. I hung up and I stood there for a long time. The stone in my chest got heavier. 14 people attended the funeral. Neighbors. A few of Margaret's friends from the garden club. Her sister from Louisville, who flew in despite bad knees and a fear of flying. My old colleague Frank, who drove 3 hours because that's the kind of man Frank is. David stood beside me under the funeral home's canopy. It rained the entire time, a steady gray November rain. I remember thinking Margaret would have found something poetic in it. She always found the poetry in things I couldn't see. At the graveside, David leaned close and said quietly, we should probably sit down with Gerald this week, while you're still up here. Gerald. He knew the name of my attorney. After, I said, Of course, I just think, after. David. He nodded. I stood at my wife's grave until everyone else had gone. The funeral director's assistant finally came and touched my arm gently and told me they needed to finish. I thanked him. I walked to my car in the rain without an umbrella. I sat in the driver's seat for 20 minutes without starting the engine. Then I drove home and I sat at the kitchen table and I made 2 cups of coffee and I finally cried. David appeared in my kitchen the next morning at 7:30 with a legal pad and a pen. He had slept in the guest room. I had heard him on the phone until late. I couldn't make out the words, but I recognized the tone. The business tone. The closing a deal tone. He poured himself coffee he didn't ask. Just poured and sat across from me. Dad, I know this is hard, but we really do need to talk about the house. I looked at him across the table. My son, 40 years old, the same dark eyes as his mother, the same stubborn set to his jaw. Somewhere in there was the boy who used to climb into our bed during thunderstorms and who cried for a week when our dog died. I tried to find him. What about the house? I said. Well, it was in both your names jointly. Now that Mom is gone, technically, I know how joint tenancy works, David. I'm a property owner, not an idiot. He had the decency to pause. Right. Of course. I just mean you're in a big house. 4 bedrooms. On your own now. And Renee and I die. He cleared his throat. We've talked about it. We think the estate should be handled properly. Mom's share. Your mother didn't have a share, I said. The house is mine. He blinked. What? Your mother transferred her interest in the property to me 14 months ago. It was done by a licensed attorney. Witnessed, recorded with the county. I am the sole owner of this house, David. Have been for over a year. The legal pad sat untouched on the table. That's I don't, Dad. That can't be right. There are laws. There are spousal share statutes, which apply to estates after death, I said. Not to voluntary inter vivos transfers made while your mother was living and of sound mind. Gerald had her evaluated by 2 separate physicians before the transfer was finalized. Her cognitive competency is on record. I looked at my son. Your mother was very thorough. David's face was doing something complicated. The business composure was cracking. Underneath, it was something younger and uglier. The face of a man who has just discovered that a deal he thought was already done has fallen through. Why would she do that? He said. His voice had changed. Why would she go to all that trouble without telling us? I think, I said carefully, that she had her reasons. He pushed back from the table. This is unbelievable. Renee needs to know about this. I'm going to call Gerald myself. You're welcome to, I said. Though Gerald works for me, not for you. He'll tell you exactly what I've told you. David stood by the window. Outside, the oak tree was losing its leaves in the November wind. He stared at it for a long time. Did she leave anything? He finally said, quietly. In the estate. Was there anything? She left something, I said. For the grandchildren. When they turn 25, and only if they've completed a post-secondary degree. The money is held in trust with Gerald as co-trustee. It cannot be accessed, redirected, or claimed by anyone else. Your mother was very specific about the conditions. He turned from the window. For just a moment, one unguarded moment, I saw it cross his face. Not grief, not even anger. Disappointment. Pure, calculated disappointment. And something in my chest, that heavy stone that had been sitting there since August, shifted. Not because I was glad to see my son disappointed. I wasn't. It hurt in a way that nothing else about these weeks had hurt more than the rain at the funeral, more than the empty side of the bed, more than any of it. Because that expression on my son's face told me that Margaret had been right. Years ago on the back porch, watching the Cardinals, she had seen it clearly. She had grieved it quietly. And then, because she was the woman she was, she had done something about it. I called Renee that afternoon. I heard, she said, before I could speak. David called me this morning. He say, a long silence. Dad, her voice cracked. Just slightly. Was she angry at us? Is that why she did it? I thought about that question for a long time before I answered. Your mother loved you, I said. Both of you. That didn't change. What she did for me. To make sure I was taken care of. She did it because she was afraid, and she was right to be afraid, that the minute she was gone, I'd be fighting my own children over the roof, over my head. I paused. Was she wrong? Renee didn't answer. Your mother spent 14 months dying, I said. She spent that time making sure I wouldn't be alone and homeless at 64. What did you spend it doing? Another silence. I heard her breathing. I'm sorry I didn't come to the funeral, she whispered. I know. The conference. Renee, I said it gently. I'm not going to pretend with you. Not anymore. Your mother is gone and I don't have the energy to pretend. I looked out the window at the oak tree. You can call me when you want to talk. Really talk. I'd like that. But I'm done pretending everything is fine when it isn't. she cried. I let her. I didn't cry. I had done my crying. I was done with that too, for now. David left the next morning. He was polite at breakfast, careful, contained, a man recalibrating. He hugged me at the door. I hugged him back. He is still my son. I'll call you, he said. I'd like that, I said. He nodded. He walked to his car. He drove away without looking back. I stood in the doorway for a while. The street was quiet. Mrs. Patterson from 3 houses down waved from her driveway. I waved back. Then I went inside and I called Frank. How you holding up, Bobby? He said, the way only old friends say it, no performance, no agenda, just the actual question. I'm okay, I said. And I meant it, or at least the version of it that was possible right now. You want to get lunch? I'll drive up Saturday, he said. Good, I said. I'll make Margaret's chili. She wrote the recipe down. I'm going to learn it. Frank laughed a real laugh, warm and unguarded. She'd like that, he said. Yeah, I said. She would. In the weeks that followed, I learned some things about myself. I learned that I could make the chili not as well as Margaret. Not yet, but recognizably. I learned that I could sleep in the bedroom again, though I still slept on my side of the bed. I learned that the cardinal came to the oak tree every morning, just after sunrise, and that I did not need to decide whether that meant anything to find comfort in it. I learned that grief is not a problem to be solved. It is a country you move into, and slowly, you learn where the streets are. I heard from Gerald in December. There had been an inquiry from a Nashville attorney about contesting the property transfer. Gerald handled it. I don't know the details. I trust Gerald the way I trusted Margaret completely. David called in January. Not about the house, just a call. We talked for 20 minutes about nothing in particular, the Titans, the weather, a book he was reading. It was awkward in places. There were things unsaid between us, heavy and unresolved. But it was a call. It was a start. Renee came in February, unannounced, with her youngest, a 7-year-old named Sophie, who I had not seen in over a year. Sophie ran straight to the backyard and stood under the oak tree looking up at the branches the way children do, like the tree was something wonderful. Renee and I sat on the back porch. We didn't talk about the house or the estate or any of it. We talked about her mother, really talked the stories. The small ones, the ones you forget you know until you start telling them. By the end, we were both laughing and crying in that particular way that only happens when you are grieving someone you truly loved. She would have liked this, Renee said, looking out at Sophie in the yard. She loved Sophie, I said. She loved all of us, Renee said quietly. Even when we made it hard, I nodded. That's what love actually is, I said. The real kind. It doesn't stop when it gets hard. It just gets quieter. Renee looked at me. I think she understood. I want to tell you something I've learned. At 64, standing on the far side of the hardest year of my life, love is not loud. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't demand that you notice it. It works in the background, quietly and persistently. The way Margaret worked, the way she spent 14 months while she was dying, making sure that when she was gone, I would be okay. Not because she wanted to punish anyone. Not out of bitterness. Out of love. Out of the deep, practical, unshowy love of a woman who had spent 39 years caring for the people in her life and who, even at the very end, could not stop. She didn't leave me a message. No letter, no video, no dramatic final words. She left me a house, free and clear, and a recipe for chili written in her careful handwriting. And 39 years of mornings. That was enough. It was more than enough. The cardinal comes every morning, just after sunrise. I make 1 cup of coffee now. I am learning to make it right. I sit on the back porch and I watch the light come up over the oak tree. And I think about what she told me years ago, on an ordinary evening. The deepest thing you can do for someone is make sure they're okay after you're gone. She always was right about everything. I am okay, Margaret. I am going to be okay.